Due to increased enrollment and aging infrastructure, both the John William Dickus and Minot Forest Elementary might have just reached their breaking point, and Wareham students deserves better. In charge of exploring different viable solutions and possibilities towards replacing the aging Minot Forest and the equally aging Dickus Elementary is the Minot Forest Building Committee. In the studio, I'm joined by Dr. Kimberly Shiverhood, the Superintendent of Wareham Public Schools and also the Chair of Minot Forest Building Committee. I'm also joined by Ms. Joan Simmons, the Principal at Minot Forest Elementary, and Bernard Pigeon, a member of Minot Building Committee. Thank you all for joining me. Now, the committee is exploring viable solutions to fixing the rundown infrastructure and overcrowding at both Minot and Dickus Elementary. Ms. Simmons, would you please paint us a picture of the issues that you're facing at Minot Forest?
So the biggest concern right now is space. We don't have enough classrooms in the building. About 2 years ago, we had portable classrooms that were demolished because they deteriorated, and we lost 4 classrooms. So we have art that's on a cart, technology goes to the classrooms, music is being held in the gymnasium. I have special education staff all sharing a library space. So lack of space is one issue. Teachers working within the confinements of the building is another issue. For instance, electrical outlets in the classroom, they have 1. If they're lucky, they have 2. So with the technology that we have now that's available to us, they have to pick and choose what they're plugging in at a certain time. So that has become an issue. And in the age of the building, we have things that are breaking down that need repairs. So the building, when it was built back, in the 60s, wasn't built for the world that we have today. And there's not a whole lot of room for growth right now within that building.
And it seems like growth is what is needed here. We have the technology or potential of having better technology, but the building does not allow it. And these are the same problems that I've heard from Dickus Elementary as well. Now, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, one of the things that they require from every town who is looking to build a new school is the feasibility study, the study that will explore different options for revamping the existing school. So, to you, Dr. Shiverhood, and also Ms. Simmons and also Bernie, would you say that a new elementary school is necessary? Have we explored all the options?
Well, I think one of the things that we need to do as a building committee and do our due diligence for the town and our students is to explore renovation and to explore new build. And that's one of the pieces that our architect and our project managers are doing. When we come back at the end of the day, then there'll be financials about what it would cost to do a renovation, what it would cost to do a new build. There are other factors that we have to take into consideration, because if we were going to renovate, right now we're only approved to renovate Minot Forest. We also do not have any place to relocate students during this renovation. And then we would have to go back and make application to the MSBA for Dickus Elementary. When you look at the opportunity to build one building to house both Dickus and Minot students, I think we would be careless not to consider that, just because in the long run we are going to need to do something with Dickus in the very near future, and we have this opportunity now, and I would certainly ask for my colleagues' input.
I think, as Kim has outlined, when she refers to the MSBA, they have a very stringent guideline that we have to follow in order for us to be approved for reimbursement. And one of those issues, as Kim has started to allude to, we have to go through the process of finding out, or at least getting an estimate, how much would it cost just to bring the buildings up to code, not to do anything else. Then how much to cost to code, renovate, add on. So we have to go through all those steps. So the various people who are going to vote on this will understand we've done a thorough examination of what we need. And to speak more directly to the language that Kim has used, we desperately need new schools. Joan, from what she has mentioned here, has just gone through the periphery of what she has to deal with day to day. To begin with, when we did this process, they did tours of Degas and Minot, so we could get an idea of what is actually in those buildings and what they're dealing with. And they do an outstanding job with what they have to work with. But, and that's a big but, we can have a better school system if we give them an opportunity to do their jobs in the classroom. And that's what we need. Teachers in the classrooms, as Joan has alluded to, the portables were fine, but they can only last so long. And even Degas had portables also.
They still have them.
And we took those down. So the classroom space, I've seen them have offices in corridors. The SPED program, there was 4 classes in one room, divided up. We did do a disservice to our children if we don't give them something better to learn in.
Yes, and those portables, I heard they were coming from Wareham Middle School and then to you guys, Degas and Minot, right?
Yes, and typically they have a life of 10 years, and we had them for about 30 years.
So you have utilized pretty much everything. That's what I'm hearing, that this was not just an irrational decision, waking up in the morning saying we need to build a new school. Some people in the community have mentioned the fact that we have a lot of elementary schools or schools that have closed down. We no longer use them. And they said, what about using those schools, opening them up, or doing something productive with them, selling them, or something like that? What would you say?
Well, we have given back schools to the town, and they've repurposed them, such as Hammond Elementary now is home to the Boys and Girls Club as well as a private school. East, we're exploring our options with the East Elementary. People asking about putting students in some of the buildings that we currently have, we would have to bring them up to code. The wiring, the heating, everything about the building would need to be repurposed, such as what we would do if we had to remodel Degas or Minot. And so when you look at the remodeling cost versus the new build cost and all the parameters that you have to meet, many times the new build is much more effective. We know that buildings now that MSBA are building are programmed to last 50 years. And so what we're trying to do is to provide a template. What do we think, what do our students need now, and what do we think they'll need in the future? Very hard to predict, but certainly when you have buildings that equipment's breaking and we cannot repair because they don't make the replacement parts any longer, when we have doors that are just falling down because of the age, it's really time to do something. Our kids deserve a very nice place to come to school.
I think some of those old buildings that Kim refers to, they've been used up already. And the current buildings they're using, they're on the verge of going that way. When we did the tour, the teachers were looking at their watches to determine when the class ended, because the bell system didn't work. The intercom doesn't work, or it's repaired now, by the way. Yes, mine it's finally got repaired. But these are so old, and as Kim referred to, we're trying to project ourselves in the next 50 years. Can you imagine, place yourself 50 years ago when they were building this building, Minot or Degas. Could they have envisioned what we're doing now in the classroom? I mean, when they purchase books, they're not purchasing just books, they're purchasing software that goes with them. And so you go into a building, we're all wireless now. We're sitting here and our cell phones would take us to the moon. They never envisioned something like that, and it's extraordinarily difficult to sit there as we do in the committee and say, oh, we got this vision for 50 years. No.
And you did mention, before the interview began, you said if we were to divide these kids to all these other schools, transportation would be very, very hard to manage.
And we'd be parsing them out. You might have first grade over in this building, because that's all it can hold. Third grade over here somewhere, and so you've got a bus route going like crazy. There's children sometimes are spending over an hour on a bus. Now, just to get to the schools, we need a better system to feed the schools, take care of the children. And as Kim says, we can't shortchange them. It's not fair.
Okay.
Having been principal of East Wareham and Hammond in the past, Hammond does not have an elevator, so that would be a cost that we would have to do, as Kim said, to bring the building up to code, sprinklers. East Wareham has 4 classrooms on the main level, There's some smaller classrooms upstairs and one room down in the basement. You can't put an entire grade level in any one of those buildings. So, and we don't want to have grade levels spread out throughout town as well.
Wow. Now, for the times that you gave tours to parents to show them what's going on with the schools, what were their reactions? Did they seem interested?
They were interested, and I don't think they realized the challenges that we face day to day until it was pointed out to them.
Mm-hmm.
And we are more than willing to have more tours if anyone has any questions. We welcome questions so that we can give factual answers, not just opinions, but we want to make sure the public has the information that they need.
Okay.
How difficult, Kim and Joe, would it be to ask a parent to spend a day? I mean, the impact would be realizing what's actually going on. It's one thing to take a tour. As I've been sitting in on a vision meetings that they've had for developing the plan and talking to the teachers themselves and listening to them talk amongst themselves. You get a better vision of what is actually going on inside the classroom or not because of what they have to deal with. I mean, when they come in the morning, the children come in, and one issue we haven't addressed at all in the meeting, I think is a more important one, to start with, is giving them breakfast. They give them breakfast in the classroom because they would lose them waiting in line and all. I think it's the smarter thing to do. But we have to cope with the very first thing the teacher has to do is to help them eat, then clean it all up, and then get on with their classroom assignments. And a parent doesn't really vision that unless they see it. We don't. We're visual people. And if you don't see that and experience it in some way, you really don't get the true depth of the problem.
Absolutely. Now, the MSAB assumes that 85% of the space will be used, and the additional space is for growth opportunities and enrollment. The current population for both Deacon's and Minot, I believe, is 983 students.
We're building it for 1,020.
And that's an addition of 37 students. Now, can we determine how, in the long run, the feasibility study, can they tell us our population, how it will increase? I mean, is 37 additional students what we're looking at, what we're projecting 50 years from now?
Well, 50 years, I'm not sure, but we do have enrollment studies that
Okay.
we have to look at that go at least 10 years out. And they
Okay.
look at birth rates and everything else of the town, and they can project how many students they feel will be in the school at a given year.
So are you okay with the 37?
Yes, based on what
Alright.
we have now.
The criteria they use for developing the studies is pretty standard. So no matter where you are, you're not trying to do the variation just because we think we're going to grow. It's the parameters are all the same.
There were a lot of building sites that were discussed.
There were
12.
There were 12 originally. It was narrowed down to 4,
Yes,
and now it's down to 2.
to 2. And the 4 were where the Minot School is, where the Deacon's School is, Minot Ave, closer to Minot Elementary, and also at the Town Hall. Yesterday, while I attended your meeting for the first time, it was narrowed to, well, it seems like the feeling in the room, you all thought Minot Forest Elementary will be the better site. So would you explain to us just the process of what you looked at to narrowing from 12 to 4 to 2 between Town Hall and Minot, and the feeling of maybe Minot will be the best place?
So we're still exploring 2 sites.
Okay.
We have to do our due diligence for both sites. One of the things that the design team had to look at were the FEMA maps,
Okay.
and the MSBA wouldn't approve putting a school on a plot of land where it could be in a flood zone. And there's 2 different flood zones, 100 years and 500 years. There's a lot of fill and soil that you would have to bring in if you wanted to have a building put there. We have to look at traffic and safety, and so we haven't chosen a site yet. That's still something the committee is working on.
Okay.
I know the Board of Selectmen want us to continue to look at the Town Hall site, and we'll look, and at one point by April, we will have to have a preferred site that we recommend.
You go into the factors, and it's amazing the number of things you have to consider. Do you have enough water? That is, say, is the water main large enough to keep an increased building? Such as a Minot site, you almost double it more than double the size of the existing building. Sewerage, of all things to think about, gas, if it's probably heat and the like, and you need egress and access to the site. Is it appropriate? We were discussing traffic last night, and the number of vehicles on Route 6 Route 6 is pretty high, especially when you put in all those buses coming in and out of there, plus all the parents with their vehicles and the like, so that's an issue. And the various utilities already go through the building for other purposes, that is, say, through the piece of property. And this, Joan was mentioning the fill. We can build in the FEMA location, but we have to raise the building up, and they require us to be so many feet over the highest level. So you were going to step up to the building in order to have it there. Now with Minot, we have to excavate a lot of property to go back to leave enough room for the piece of land to be there. So there's a lot of variables in it, and we look at them all. Everything's still open.
You know, and I think we also have to look at who will occupy the building. It'll be occupied with younger students, so we have to think about safety issues as far as how many floors can we safely go up with young students to get them in and out of the building, and even during the day, their activities. What kind of activity, movement, and how do we make sure that the building meets the needs of the age level? I think that's one thing that we have to look at, as well as, you know, we need to make sure that when we make this proposal, it takes into consideration all factors which will make this the best possible location. And it's not quite as simple as saying, well, we really like this site. If we go to the town hall site, then we're going to be looking at what's happening to our fields, because there's a ripple effect that will happen. Where would we possibly locate them? How are we going to find enough parking? And again, is it a cost savings for the district-wide? You know, these are all things that we're having to ask ourselves, because our community and our students deserve the answers.
Well, one issue you brought up last night, Kim, that come out of the blue, I would say, but only one in your position would think of it. How do you evacuate the building? If you have a fire drill or there's an attack of some kind, what do you do with them? And then we got into the discussion of, okay, how many stairwells would that require? And we went up to 3 floors or 4 floors, these little legs going downstairs, 4 flights. That's difficult for them, how that is going to impact it. And then you mentioned the fields and all, and they're right. There's issues you don't even know exist that are important.
Yeah. Very good. Now, the Board of Selectmen, the school committee, and the school building committee have all decided that we need one big elementary school, dissolving what was Deacon's, what was Minot Elementary. What was the reason of this? I mean, you mentioned a little bit about that if we are to rebuild, then we're just going to start with Minot, and then maybe later on we'll go to Deacon's. Was there any other reasons to just having one big elementary school?
Well, when you look at the condition of Deacon's, it certainly is coming to the point where we need to actively address how do we replace it or how do we repurpose it. You know, MSBA has given us an opportunity to combine the two into one building.
I think there's only 2 years difference in the age of the building.
And again, we're looking at pieces of equipment at Deacon's, like our generator. Our generator's been there for 48 years. They do not make parts for this generator any longer, and if it goes down, we're not looking at a repair. We're looking at a replacement. You know, our HVAC, we have asbestos in both buildings that we have capsulized, which means we can't do any work because it disturbs the asbestos. So there's a lot of factors that would just say to us, explore the combination of 2 buildings for the students in our community.
I have also heard from parents who have children in both schools. If they have to pick up their children or they're dropping them off late, to have to go across town to 2 different schools is difficult for them.
Okay. Now, how would managing look like in this one elementary school?
Well, one thing that we made very clear to our architects is the fact that we need this to be a student-friendly, public-friendly building. And so there needs to be accesses into the building that are secure, so when parents drop off, there's a location that we can divide. So we would have early area drop-off for students that are in pre-K, K, and 1, and then there'd be another drop-off for students in the upper grades. That's one thing that we would look at. The other thing is it needs to flow. So I don't need to have students that are traveling from one area of the building clear across to the other area of the building. It needs to be more of a grade level base. So all my kindergartens are in one area, all the first grade are in one area, because students need to be able to travel and move effortlessly. So that would be one thing that it would look at. We also know that we need support throughout the building. So right now we have counselors, we have social workers, we have assistant principals, we have other support people, and they would be scattered throughout the building to offer the support needed.
When I was at the meetings for the MSBA and we chose the architect and our project manager, I told them I wanted a wow environment. These kids deserve to be walking into a building this is their building. It's not ours as adults, it's their building. And I felt they had to be welcoming and be just excited about being in their building. This is their sanctuary for 48 hours in a day.
Now, speaking of the WOW building, have you spoken to the kids to see what they want, or is that too early? Like, what kind of environment they're hoping to have?
Well, actually, we're getting ready to put a survey out on our Facebook. What are people looking for? What is important? What would they like to see? And I'm sure that we're going to be asking the students.
That's a good idea. You know, we talked about that, and of course, thinking in the context, asking the adults. Why not ask the kids?
Yeah.
But I would suggest perhaps developing a totally different survey addressing that age level.
We did ask our fourth graders, and they wrote a couple of essays, and they're very concerned with a green building, green energy efficient buildings.
Wow.
Yes.
That is very impressive.
And that's an automatic in a new school building that would happen.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
that was
very
one of
impressive.
the main things that they were talking about. And it was a topic they're exploring in science, so.
Okay, I'm
They're
very
very
happy to hear
interested,
such
yes.
things. So I understand that the committee is still on its early stages. There are 9 stages to go through. So do we have an estimate figure of how much this will cost?
This would be totally premature.
Yeah, too early.
Yeah, our guesstimates are purely on from paper to paper. And as an example, we were talking about the necessity of to drill to find out what kind of soil is underneath, to determine what kind of work needs to be done to prepare this site. And that's a cost. And again, information from that will determine which site is more attractive too. So there's different levels we have to go through, and we're in the very, very preliminary stages. And as I said, those corings will determine which one may be more attractive. We may find out, we're looking very much at Minot. They may find something that says, no, we can't. So it would just be premature. I mean, we can guesstimate, of course, but it's unfair, I think, to tell people it's going to cost us X number of dollars and then some come down the trail 2 months later and say, oh, by the way, it's an extra 5.
Yes. Yeah.
That obviously is something the committee is keeping in mind as we're looking at all the options, is the cost for what will happen for the town side, and then there'll be the reimbursement piece from MSBA as well.
Okay. And considering the fact that we have a big number, a significant population of elderly in our town, those who do not have kids in Wareham Public Schools anymore, and we have some parents who their kids are already gone. I mean, are you guys concerned with having a budget approved, town voting, with considering the fact that we have elderly and people who do not see the connection? Why help? Why, commit to taxes or commit to a new school?
One of our jobs is to, when we do determine or develop the final plan, is to convince the voter that it is necessary and they should seriously consider making a little room in their budget for what it's going to cost to do it. It's all a matter of sales, and it's not unfair or anything, but I would say it's information, making everybody aware of, A, what it's doing now, what you're dealing with now, and what we can improve on it and make it better for the children. I look in the context for the viewpoint of a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old, what do we need, or what do they deserve?
Okay.
And the children we have now are the future of Wareham. So we want to make sure they have a great educational experience. We also want to design our school to be used by the community, whether it's workshops we're doing, the cafes that our Office of Beyond School Time is running. We want this to be a community-friendly building that's used not just during the day for school, but in the evenings as well.
You know, and being a taxpayer in town, I will tell you that I appreciate the fiscal oversight in how we're going about this project. We are looking very closely at all pieces. How do we provide the building that we would like to provide for our students, but be fiscally responsible to the taxpayers? So this is something that we keep in the forefront of our mind during the whole project.
Now, what are some of the challenges the committee is facing, if any?
Well, we certainly are on a time crunch because MSBA has some timetables. We're trying to meet them. That's one piece. Finding the best site is another challenge. Making sure that the plan we come up with is the plan that meets the needs of our students and will meet the needs of our students in the future. We don't know what's coming in education. So we have to be able to provide a building that's flexible, that's able to adapt to whatever changes come. I think the other piece that you talked about was how do we communicate this to the public so they understand why it's important to approve this expenditure, because it is an expenditure and it does take resources from the town. So those are all some of the challenges, and I know that I haven't even hit on all of them.
Yeah.
And one of the concerns we have, because I'm from the Finance Committee, is that there are a lot of needs within the community itself. In addition to the schools, we've aged everywhere. And so the concerns that are coming up are very important, all very critical to the community, to the individual that live there, and to convince them that they may need them simultaneously, but consider them individually. Where do you do it? My personal view, we as adults can cope with almost anything. Children cannot. And it's our responsibility to make sure that they have what they need, because it's our future. Well, it's their future too, more importantly, and that's what we have to do. So from a finance point of view, we have to put it all in the package and then evaluate everything. And that's what the committee and I and the committee are doing, is trying to be as thorough as possible. Consider all the aspects of every issue.
That on our website, you can go to a link, Minot Forest Building Committee, and you can access the documents, you can access our different plans, etc. We urge the public to do that and ask us questions. We'd love to share additional information, give them tours of the facilities, and just sit and listen to their input and their ideas.
To everybody who's watching, thank you for joining us. Again, in the studio, I had Dr. Kimberly Shiverhood, the Superintendent of Wareham Public Schools and also the Chair of Minot Forest Building Committee. We were also joined by Ms. Joan Simmons, the Principal of Minot Forest Elementary, and Bernie Pigeon, a member of Minot Forest Building Committee. Together, we were discussing issues facing both Minot Forest and Dickers Elementary due to aging infrastructure and increased enrollment, and efforts spearheaded by Minot Forest Building Committee in solving these issues. From WCTV, I am Queen Banda, and I wish you all a wonderful day.